A little girl walked into a luxury restaurant barefoot, her clothes torn and her face covered in dust. She was publicly humiliated by the owner, an arrogant millionaire. But when the child revealed who she really was, the entire dining room fell. Silent, the secret kept for years was about to forever change both their destinies, and no one in that restaurant would ever forget what they witnessed that night. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories delivered daily. The millionaire adjusted the Rolex on his wrist as the chauffeur parked the limo in front of the city's most prestigious restaurant. He owned the establishment, along with 20 others in the same chain scattered across the country. In the reflection of the tinted window, he examined his impeccable suit, custom-tailored in London. His eyes, however, remained empty, failing to reflect the gleam of the diamonds in his cufflinks. Confirm my usual reservation and prepare the chef's tasting menu. I'll be here with investors in an hour, he ordered the manager over the phone without bothering to greet him. As he entered the restaurant, all the employees bowed subtly. The main dining room was impeccable with its crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and polished silver cutlery. The scent of rare spices and fine herbs hung in the air. The millionaire walked to his usual table in the center of the room, like a king ascending his throne. The waiters rushed to pull out his chair, unfold the napkin over his lap, and pour water into Venetian crystal goblets. Miles away, in a neighborhood forgotten by the city, the little girl was sitting on the dirt floor of the shack she called home. Her thin fingers rummaged through a small, worn wooden chest, the only object her mother had left her. Inside, besides a few personal items, was an envelope yellowed with age. The child had disheveled hair and skin marked by the constant dust of the streets. Her bare feet showed calluses formed by long walks. The dress, once colorful, now displayed stains and tears that told stories of her daily struggle for survival. "It's been 3 weeks today, Mrs. Thompson," she whispered to the faded photograph she held reverently. In the portrait, a woman with a gentle smile wore a cook's uniform. "3 weeks since you left, and the food ran out yesterday." The neighbor who had been taking care of the girl since her mother's death had fallen ill and hadn't appeared for the past 2 days. The child's stomach ached with hunger and her eyes burned from crying so much. The night before, while rummaging through her mother's belongings in search of something she could sell to buy bread, she found that sealed letter with her name written on the front. "To my daughter, when I'm no longer here," read the envelope, in shaky handwriting. With trembling hands, the girl opened the letter and began to read. Her eyes widened as she absorbed each word. Confusion, anger, and a strange feeling of purpose took over her small body. "So that's why you cried when you thought I was asleep," she murmured, carefully folding the paper. "That's why you looked at me like that when I asked about my father." The child put the letter inside the torn pocket of her dress and wiped the tears with the back of her dirty hands. For the first time in weeks, her gaze showed not only pain, but determination. She knew where she needed to go. She knew what she needed to do. At the restaurant, the millionaire tasted a rare wine while checking messages on his cell phone. His empire grew every day, as did his fortune, but there was a persistent void that no success could fill. "Is there a problem, sir?" asked the sommelier, noticing his distant expression. "Just serve the next bottle and don't interrupt me," he replied dryly, without looking up from the screen. Meanwhile, across town, the girl walked with purpose. Her thin legs moved quickly through the streets, dodging cars and passers-by. She clutched the paper to her chest as if it were a map to a long-lost treasure, and in a way, it was. The sky darkened as the girl finally spotted the imposing glass and marble building. Golden lights reflected in the puddles formed by the recent rain, creating a spectacle that contrasted with her small and ragged figure. The name of the restaurant shone in cursive letters on the facade, Le Ciel Doré, the golden sky. It was there that her mother had worked for years, until her body succumbed to exhaustion. The girl hesitated before the revolving doors. Through the glass, she could see the luxurious interior and the well-dressed patrons. Her bare and dirty feet seemed even more inadequate against the marble floor that shone on the other side. For a moment, she thought about giving up, but then she felt the paper in her pocket and remembered the words written by her mother. "Courage," she whispered to herself, and went forward. Inside the restaurant, the millionaire was now sitting with 3 executives. Champagne flutes gleamed under the light of the chandeliers as they discussed the acquisition of a new property. "As I was saying, gentlemen, this will be the biggest venture in our chain to date, a gastronomic complex that will revolutionize." His words were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. Frowning, he turned to see what was happening. "You can't come in here!" The maitre d's voice sounded alarmed. "This is a private establishment. Please leave. I need to speak with him. I know he's here." The child's voice echoed through the room, causing a momentary silence among the diners. The millionaire watched, incredulous, as a girl of about 10 years old burst into the hall, skillfully dodging the waiters who were trying to stop her. Her disheveled hair swayed as she ran. Her bare feet left marks on the immaculate carpet. The torn and dirty clothes seemed an insult to that sophisticated environment. "Stop her!" ordered the manager, visibly embarrassed by the situation. But the girl had already reached the center of the hall, her eyes deep and intense brown, fixed on the millionaire. There was something in that look that made him freeze in place, something disturbingly familiar. "Please," she said in a trembling but clear voice. "I just want a plate of food. I haven't eaten in days." The millionaire felt the stares of the other patrons. He felt the weight of the expectations of his guests. He felt something strange and uncomfortable growing in his chest, a mixture of irritation, embarrassment, and something else he couldn't identify. "How dare you interrupt my business dinner?" The words came out like blades from his mouth. He stood up, imposing in his custom-tailored suit. "This is no place for creatures like you. Not even my dog would eat from the same plate. Leave immediately or I'll call security." The entire dining room held its breath. Some patrons lowered their eyes, embarrassed by the cruelty of the words. Others watched, curious about the outcome of this unusual scene. The girl didn't flinch. She remained standing, absorbing each word as if they were physical blows. For a few moments, she simply stood there, small and fragile before the imposing man. Then, she raised her tear-filled eyes. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Her voice was surprisingly firm now. "I didn't come here by chance." A drop of sweat trickled down the millionaire's temple, despite the air conditioning. Something in the child's expression disturbed him deeply. "My mother worked in the kitchen of this restaurant," the girl continued. "She died 3 weeks ago. Exhaustion, the doctors said. Exhaustion from working 16-hour days in this kitchen, without ever receiving her due, without ever being able to rest properly." The guests at the table shifted uncomfortably. The millionaire felt his face flush. "That's absurd. I don't know your mother, and I'm not responsible for the hiring practices of this establishment. Now get out of here before I—" "Thompson," the girl interrupted. "Her name was Thompson, and she left something for me before she died. Something you should see." The millionaire's face paled at the sound of that name. A name he had fought to forget for years, a name that belonged to a chapter of his life he thought was forever closed. The name echoed in the millionaire's ears like a distant bell. Thompson. Fragmented images of a past he had buried deeply began to emerge in his mind. The gentle face of a young cook, a brief and secret affair, hidden in the dark corners of the kitchen after the restaurant closed. Whispered promises he never intended to keep. "Get this child out of here," he ordered, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "Now!" Two security guards approached quickly, but hesitated when they saw the disapproving looks from some of the customers. The situation was becoming a public spectacle, and the millionaire knew that this could tarnish his carefully built reputation. "Wait," said one of the executives at the table, a middle-aged man with a genuinely concerned expression. "Perhaps we should hear what the girl has to say." The millionaire shot a furious look at his guest, but realized he was losing control of the situation. With a stiff gesture, he dismissed the security guards and sat back down, adjusting his tie as if he could regain his composure. "You have 1 minute, girl. After that, you'll leave here and never come back." The child looked around, aware of the stares fixed on her small figure. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled the crumpled envelope from the pocket of her torn dress. "My mother asked for help many times," she began, in a low voice but audible throughout the silent room. "Sent letters to corporate headquarters, tried to talk to the manager, asked that her rights be respected, that she could have a few days off when she was sick, but no one listened to her." The millionaire kept an impassive expression, but his stomach tightened. He vaguely remembered reports about dissatisfied employees, but he always delegated those matters to human resources. People like Thompson were just numbers on cost spreadsheets that he reviewed quarterly. "These are serious and unfounded accusations," he replied coldly. "Our employees are treated in accordance with the law. If your mother had complaints, she should have followed the proper channels." A murmur of indignation ran through the room. The man's coldness in the face of the child's evident suffering shocked even the customers, accustomed to environments of luxury and privilege. "She did," the girl retorted, with a surprising dignity for someone so young. "She followed all the channels, but no one wanted to listen to the voice of a simple cook." She held out the envelope toward the millionaire, who recoiled as if it were something dangerous. "I don't want to read your fabrications," he said, with a forced smile for the other customers. "This is clearly an emotional scam to extort money, something typical of these people." "These people?" An elderly lady sitting 2 tables away raised her voice. "This is just a hungry child, sir, and from what I see, she's alone in the world." The millionaire felt control of the situation slipping through his fingers. Public opinion was turning against him, right there, in his own restaurant. He needed to regain command quickly. "All right," he finally said, reaching for the envelope. "Let's end this charade once and for all." His fingers touched the yellowed paper, and he felt an inexplicable chill. With calculatedly slow movements, he opened the envelope and took out the letter. As his eyes scanned the handwritten lines, his face lost color. The handwriting was unmistakable, the words devastating. This is impossible," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. "What does the letter say?" asked one of the executives, unable to contain his curiosity. The millionaire quickly folded the paper and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. His mind worked frantically, calculating the potential damage, the legal implications, the scandal that could follow. "It's nothing but sentimental nonsense," he said, trying to sound dismissive, "as I suspected." But his eyes betrayed the shock, and when he looked back at the girl, there was something new in his gaze, fear. "What do you want?" he asked in a low voice, leaning in so that only she could hear. "Justice," the child replied without hesitation, "and recognition." The millionaire felt a drop of cold sweat run down his spine. In his entire life of ruthless negotiations and tough decisions, he had never felt as cornered as he did at that moment before a simple barefoot child. "This is absurd," he said aloud again, regaining his composure. "I don't have time for this kind of theater. I have important business to attend to." He stood up abruptly, signaling the manager to approach. "Give this girl a plate of food, and then make sure she leaves, and warn security that she is not to enter this establishment again." With these words, he turned his back and walked stiffly toward his private office in the back of the restaurant, aware of the disapproving looks that followed him. He needed to think. He needed to call his lawyers. He needed to bury that story before it destroyed everything he had built. The restaurant's private office was a sanctuary of luxury and power, walls lined with fine wood-framed certificates and awards earned over the years. A solid mahogany desk dominated the room, impeccably organized with a single leather portfolio at the center, the symbol of a controlling mind. The millionaire closed the door behind him and collapsed into the leather armchair. His hands, always steady when signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now trembled as he pulled the letter from his pocket. He reread each line, each word written by Thompson's hand. The truth was there, undeniable as a sentence. "Impossible," he murmured, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair. This can't be true. But deep down he knew it was. The timeline matched perfectly. The brief relationship with the young cook almost 11 years ago, the abrupt way he dismissed her when she tried to tell him something important, the convenient transfer to another restaurant in the chain, in a distant city. He got up and poured himself an expensive bourbon, drinking it in one gulp. The burning sensation of the alcohol going down his throat failed to dissipate the knot forming there. A discreet knock on the door interrupted his tumultuous thoughts. "Come in," he ordered, quickly composing himself. The restaurant manager entered, visibly nervous. "Sir, pardon the interruption, but we have a delicate situation." "I know. The girl. I told you to feed her and send her away." "Yes, sir. We offered her food, but she refuses to leave without speaking to you again." And the manager hesitated, swallowing hard. "There are reporters outside." "What?" The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. Apparently, there was a food critic in the dining room tonight. He posted something on social media about the incident and, well, the story is spreading quickly. Panic began to set in like a hungry predator. His reputation, his businesses, everything he had built so carefully over decades could crumble in a matter of hours. "Call my lawyers, now." When the manager left, the millionaire remained motionless for a few minutes, contemplating his options. An idea began to form in his calculating mind. If he couldn't deny the situation, perhaps he could control it, turn it into something advantageous. A story of redemption, perhaps. The powerful businessman who discovers a long-lost daughter and welcomes her in a gesture of humanity. His considerations were interrupted by another knock on the door, this time softer. When he gave permission to enter, he was surprised to see the small figure of the girl, accompanied by an elegant lady whom he recognized as a frequent customer. "Forgive my intrusion," said the lady, with a firmness that did not admit contestation. "But I thought you both needed privacy for this conversation." Before he could protest, the woman stepped back and closed the door, leaving him alone with the child. The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. The millionaire observed the girl with new eyes. Now that he knew the truth, he could see the subtle similarities, the shape of the eyes, the way her chin jutted out slightly when she raised her head, the way her small hands intertwined in a gesture that he himself made when nervous. "What's your name?" he asked finally, his voice softer than he intended. "The same name as my grandmother," the girl replied. "My mother said it was a strong name of a woman who never bowed before difficulties." Another knot formed in the millionaire's throat. His mother had also been a strong woman who raised a son alone after being abandoned by her husband. The irony was not lost on him. He had become exactly the kind of man he had always despised. "Sit down," he offered, indicating an armchair. The girl hesitated before accepting. Her bare feet barely touched the floor when she sat down. Up close, the millionaire could see the marks of deprivation on her thin body, the signs of a childhood, without privilege or protection. "Why did you come here?" he asked, although he knew the answer. "Because I had nowhere else to go," she replied simply. "The neighbor who took care of me got sick. The food ran out, and my mother told me in that letter that you were my father." The word hung in the air between them. Father, a title he had never considered, never desired. His life was perfectly organized around his businesses, his achievements, his empire. There was no room for a child, especially one who could destroy everything with her mere existence. "And what do you expect from me?" he asked, putting on his armor of coldness again. "Nothing," the girl replied, surprising him. "My mother never wanted anything from you for herself, but she hoped that if something happened to her, you wouldn't let her daughter starve." The simplicity of the answer completely disarmed him. There were no demands for inheritance. There were no veiled threats of scandals. Just the desperate hope of a mother that her child would not be abandoned to her fate. For the first time in many years, the millionaire felt shame, a deep and painful shame that no amount of money could erase. The night wore on as the millionaire and the girl remained in the office, separated by a chasm of circumstances and experiences. Outside, the murmur in the restaurant had turned into open speculation. The reporters waited in the lobby, eager for a sensational story. The customers, divided between indignation and curiosity, lingered longer than usual, waiting for the outcome of this unexpected drama. "Are you hungry?" asked the millionaire, breaking the oppressive silence. The girl nodded timidly. Her stomach had been rumbling for hours, but pride, a trait that ironically she had inherited from her father, prevented her from mentioning it. With an automatic gesture, the millionaire pressed a button on the phone on the desk. "Bring the full tasting menu," he ordered when the manager answered, "and a juice here to the office." While they waited, the man discreetly studied every detail of the child. The unkempt hair that, under other conditions, would be exactly the same dark chocolate color as his own hair in his youth. The attentive eyes that observed the environment with a mixture of awe and fascination. The upright posture, despite the adverse circumstances. "Your mother," he began, hesitant. "How was she before?" He couldn't finish the sentence. The guilt formed a knot in his throat, making words difficult. "She worked a lot," replied the girl, her thin fingers playing with the torn edge of her dress. "She came home late when I was already asleep. She left early, leaving food ready for me. On Sundays, when the restaurant closed, she slept almost all day, but she always found the energy to tell me stories before bed." A gentle knock on the door announced the arrival of the food. A waiter entered with a cart, laden with exquisitely arranged dishes, a selection of the best items on the menu. The delicious aroma filled the room, making the girl inhale deeply, her eyes shining with anticipation. "You can leave it there." The millionaire dismissed him. "And I don't want any interruptions." When they were alone again, he indicated the food with a gesture. "Help yourself." The girl looked at the various pieces of silverware arranged beside the plate, clearly confused about which to use. The millionaire noticed her discomfort and, in a surprisingly gentle gesture, moved the chair closer and began to explain. "This one is for the appetizer. This one for the main course. But it doesn't matter, really. Use whichever you prefer." As the child ate, first with hesitation, then with evident pleasure, the millionaire felt something strange growing inside him. A forgotten emotion, buried under years of ruthless ambition and calculated coldness. "Is she enjoying it?" he asked, referring to the food. "It's the most delicious thing I've ever eaten," the girl replied sincerely. a small smile appearing on her parched lips. That smile struck the millionaire like a lightning bolt. It was Thompson's smile, the same smile that years ago had briefly illuminated his life before he chose to push her away. "Your mother," he hesitated again. "Did she talk about me?" The girl lowered her fork, thoughtful. "Not much. She just said that my father was a very busy man who had important business all over the world. When I asked why he never visited us, she said that some people weren't born to be fathers." She raised her eyes, meeting the millionaire's. "She never spoke badly of you, not once." The guilt hit him with renewed force. Thompson had protected his image, even after all the harm he had caused her, even after discarding her as worthless when she needed him most. "Where are you living now?" he asked, trying to divert his thoughts from those painful conclusions. "In our house. I mean, in the shack where we lived. Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, was taking care of me, but she got sick. She said she'd be back in a few days, but... And school? I stopped going when Mom got sick. I needed to take care of her." There was a quiet pride in her voice, a child who had taken on adult responsibilities prematurely. The millionaire felt an involuntary admiration. That small, fragile girl possessed an inner strength that many of his highly paid executives did not demonstrate. "Did you like school?" The child's eyes lit up. "A lot, especially math and English class. Mom said I could be anything I wanted when I grew up, if I studied hard enough." An urgent knock on the door interrupted the conversation. The manager entered without waiting for permission, his face pale with concern. "Sir, pardon the interruption, but the situation is getting complicated. The reporters have increased in number. Some customers are giving interviews telling about what happened in the dining room, and the lawyers have just arrived." The millionaire felt the weight of reality fall on his shoulders again. For a few minutes, in that simple conversation with the girl, he had forgotten the scandal that was brewing, the implications for his business, his reputation. "Send the lawyers in," he said finally. He turned to the child, who was watching the scene with attentive and frightened eyes. "I need to take care of some things. You can stay here and finish your meal. There are books on that shelf if you want to read while you wait." To his surprise, the girl nodded with an understanding that seemed far beyond her age. The entry of the lawyers into the office brought an immediate change in the atmosphere. 3 men in impeccable suits, carrying leather portfolios and grave expressions, positioned themselves like sentinels around the millionaire. Their calculating eyes quickly assessed the girl, who shrank instinctively in her chair. "We need to talk in private," said the oldest of them, casting a meaningful glance at the child. "The situation requires absolute discretion." The millionaire hesitated, torn between the urgency of business and the strange reluctance to move away from the girl. Finally, he gestured for her to remain seated. "You can speak." "She stays." The lawyers exchanged surprised glances, but adapted quickly. "As you wish. The reporters are formulating a rather damaging narrative," began the lead lawyer, choosing his words carefully. "They're talking about inadequate working conditions, labor exploitation, and now there's this paternity issue." The girl watched the scene silently, her shrewd eyes absorbing every word, every gesture. "What are my options?" asked the millionaire, resuming his calculating tone. "Complete denial is a possibility, but risky considering the public spectacle. We could propose a substantial financial settlement with a confidentiality clause, or," the lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable, "we could go the route of DNA testing and, depending on the result, develop an appropriate strategy. And, if the test confirms it," the question hung in the air like an unsaid sentence, "well, in that case, it would be advisable to turn a potential crisis into an opportunity. The tycoon who discovers a long-lost daughter and assumes his responsibilities." It could even improve your public image, if managed correctly. The cynicism of that approach struck the millionaire in an unexpected way. He realized that they were discussing the life of a child, his daughter, as if it were just another public relations strategy. A subtle noise made him look at the girl. She had approached the bookshelf and taken out a book that she was browsing with evident interest. "Can you read well?" he asked, interrupting the lawyer's discussion. The girl raised her eyes, surprised by the sudden question. "Yes, sir. Mum taught me even before I started school. She said that books were doors to worlds where we could be free." A heavy silence followed that simple statement. The lawyers, disconcerted by the interruption, awaited instructions. The millionaire, however, seemed to have completely forgotten about them. "What's your favorite book?" he asked, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "The Little Prince," she replied without hesitation, "especially the part about the fox that needs to be tamed." Something strange happened then on the millionaire's always controlled face. An emotion briefly crossed his eyes, like lightning illuminating a night sky. "It was mine too," he said softly, "when I was your age." The lawyers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn the conversation was taking. The oldest cleared his throat again, trying to regain control. "Sir, we need a decision on how to proceed. The press is waiting for an official statement." The millionaire refocused his attention on them, but something had changed in his expression. A different determination shone in his eyes. "I want to see the letter again," he said, holding out his hand to the girl. She hesitated for a moment, then took the folded paper from her pocket and handed it to him. The lawyers leaned forward, eager to know the contents of the document that could either topple or strengthen their client's empire. The millionaire unfolded the letter carefully and began to read aloud, to everyone's surprise. "My dear daughter, if you are reading this, it means that I am no longer by your side to protect and guide you. There is a truth that I never had the courage to tell you completely. Your father is not a distant stranger, as I allowed you to believe. Your father is the man I worked for years, the owner of the Le Ciel Doré restaurant chain." He paused, his voice faltering slightly. The lawyers were in absolute silence, as if fearing that any movement could break the fragile moment that was unfolding. "I met your father when I was just a young chef, with dreams too big for my small world. He was charismatic, brilliant, and for a brief moment, I thought we had something special. When I found out I was pregnant, he had already moved on, heading towards greater achievements. I tried to tell him about you, but the doors closed one by one. So I made the decision to raise you alone with all the love you deserved." The millionaire took a deep breath before continuing. "I never wanted you to feel anger or bitterness towards your father. We all make mistakes. We all make choices that we later regret. I believe deep down in my heart that if he really knew about you, about the extraordinary person you have become, he could not help but love you as I love you." The millionaire's eyes were watery when he looked up from the letter. A dense silence filled the office. Even the lawyers, accustomed to maintaining professional coldness, seemed touched. "There's more," the girl said softly. In the last part, the millionaire began to read again, his voice now almost a whisper. "If one day you find your father, I ask you to tell him just one thing, that I never spoke badly of him to you, and that I hope he finds in his heart the goodness that I know exists there, hidden under years of ambition. You are the best of both of us, my daughter. Never forget that." When he finished reading, the millionaire carefully folded the paper and returned it to the girl. His eyes met hers, and for the first time he did not look away. "It's true," he said simply. "You are my daughter." The admission hung in the air like a definitive sentence. The lawyers, trained to question evidence and challenge allegations, remained silent before the certainty in their client's voice. The girl, in turn, showed no surprise. In her heart, she had already known the truth from the moment she read her mother's letter. "What does this mean in practice?" asked the oldest lawyer, finally breaking the silence. "We need an immediate action plan." The millionaire got up and walked to the window that overlooked the outside of the restaurant. The crowd of reporters had increased, and camera flashes intermittently lit up the night. The story was already spreading. The powerful businessman, confronted by a barefoot child who claimed to be his daughter. "Call a press conference," he said finally. "I'm going to make an official statement." "I know it's your final decision," intervened the second lawyer, "but perhaps it would be prudent to wait for DNA testing before any public statement. Once the announcement is made, there's no going back." The millionaire turned, his gaze colder than ever. "I don't need a test. I know she's my daughter." His tone did not admit contestation. "Prepare the paternity acknowledgement documents and initiate the custody regularization process." The girl watched the scene with wide eyes, trying to understand the meaning of it all. Her small journey in search of food had turned into something much bigger. "Am I going to live with you?" she asked hesitantly, her voice almost inaudible. The millionaire turned his attention to her, realizing the fear in her eyes. He understood then that beyond the legal and public implications, there was a frightened child who had just lost her mother and whose world was turning upside down again. "If you want to," he replied, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. "I have a house that's too big for one person." The lawyers exchanged worried glances. This was not a decision they expected, nor were they prepared for the complexities that would follow. "Sir," intervened the third lawyer, who until then had remained silent, "there are practical issues to consider. Suitability of the environment, adaptation process, implications for your professional commitments." "She's my daughter, not a contract to be negotiated," cut off the millionaire with surprising firmness. As the discussion continued, another knock on the door announced the arrival of the manager, accompanied by an official-looking man. "Pardon the interruption, sir, but this is a representative from Child Protective Services. He insists on speaking with the girl." The millionaire's face paled. He had not considered this possibility, the intervention of child protection authorities. Of course, someone would have notified the responsible agencies about an abandoned child. "Good evening," said the representative, entering the office with a grave expression. "I was informed about a minor in a vulnerable situation. I need to assess the circumstances and take the appropriate measures to ensure her safety." The lawyers immediately surrounded the man, presenting business cards and initiating a technical argument about jurisdiction and proper procedures. The millionaire, however, watched the girl's reaction. The terror in her eyes was evident. "Please, don't take me to a shelter," she whispered, clinging to the book she still held against her chest. "I can go back home. Mrs. Rodriguez must be better now." The millionaire's heart contracted in a way he had not experienced in decades. The vulnerability of that child, his daughter, awakened in him a protective instinct that he did not even know he possessed. "No one is taking her to any shelter," he stated with conviction, approaching the girl. "I am her father. I have the right and the duty to take care of my daughter." The Child Protective Services representative raised his eyebrows, clearly skeptical. "Do you have any documentation to prove that claim, sir?" "We're taking care of it," one of the lawyers quickly interjected. "My client has just acknowledged paternity, and we're preparing all the necessary documentation. In the meantime, as the biological father, he has priority for temporary custody." The CPS man did not seem convinced. "That's highly irregular. The child was in a state of neglect, according to the reports. We need to follow legal procedures to ensure her safety and well-being." "I wasn't neglected," exclaimed the girl, finding courage in her indignation. "My mother died. She never abandoned me, and now I've found my father." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. The CPS representative softened his expression as he looked at the child. "I understand, honey, but my job is to make sure you're safe and well cared for." "She will be," stated the millionaire. "You have my word. And believe me, my word carries a lot of weight in this city." The tension in the room was palpable. On one side, the powerful businessman, determined to take on a responsibility he had evaded for years. On the other, the child protection system, suspicious of such a sudden transformation. "I propose a compromise," suggested the most experienced lawyer finally. "A temporary guardianship with regular follow-up visits by CPS while we finalize the legal procedures for formal acknowledgement of paternity." The representative considered the proposal for a few moments, looking alternately at the millionaire and the girl. "I'll need court authorization," he said finally, "and a detailed report on the child's housing and adaptation conditions." "You'll have all of that," guaranteed the millionaire, "and more." While the adults negotiated the details of the agreement, the girl remained quiet, watching with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Her world had completely transformed in a matter of hours. From hunger and neglect to recognition by a father she didn't even know existed. From the misery of a shack to the prospect of living in a mansion. But in her heart, a question persisted. Was it better to have a father out of obligation than to have no father at all? The first light of morning timidly entered through the large windows of the mansion when the girl opened her eyes. For a moment, she was disoriented to find herself in a room larger than the entire shack where she had lived with her mother. The soft bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets, the high ceiling decorated with elaborate moldings, everything seemed to come from an improbable dream. The previous night had been a whirlwind of events. After hours of negotiations, the CPS representative finally agreed to the temporary guardianship, subject to signed commitments and the promise of weekly follow-up visits. The lawyers had worked frantically on drafting documents and court petitions. The reporters, kept at a distance by a security cordon, speculated about the outcome of the story that was already spreading on social media. And then, the most surreal moment. The departure through the back of the restaurant to a limousine that was waiting with the engine running. The silent ride to the mansion on the outskirts of the city. The stunned housekeeper receiving hurried orders to prepare a room. The millionaire, still in his impeccable suit, personally accompanying her to the room, showing her where the bathroom was and how the automated lighting system worked. "Sleep well," he had said, clearly uncomfortable with the new situation. "We'll talk in the morning." And now it was morning, and the reality of the change in her life was beginning to settle in. The girl got up cautiously, as if fearing to break something valuable just with her movement. Her bare feet touched the soft carpet, so different from the dirt floor she was used to. She then noticed a pair of new-looking slippers next to the bed and a bathrobe too small for an adult, but perfect for her size, hanging on the door. Someone had thought of her during the night. After a bath, the first with truly hot water in weeks, and dressed in clothes she found carefully folded on an armchair, the girl hesitantly descended the imposing marble staircase. She followed the sound of voices until she found a dining room where the millionaire was having breakfast while arguing with his aides. "Ah, you're awake," he said, interrupting the conversation when he noticed her. "Come, sit down. You must be hungry." The table was set with a variety of foods that she had never seen gathered together. Fresh fruits, various breads, cakes, juices, and an endless array of options that made her eyes widen. "May I?" she asked timidly, indicating an empty chair. "Of course," replied the millionaire, gesturing for the aides to leave. "This is your place now." When they were alone, an uncomfortable silence settled in. The man who commanded business empires and negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts seemed suddenly speechless before a child. "How do you feel?" he asked finally, his voice betraying genuine concern. The girl reflected for a moment, her fingers playing nervously with the edge of the tablecloth. "Confused," she replied honestly. "Everything is happening too fast." The millionaire nodded, understanding. "For me too," he admitted, surprising them both with his frankness. "I never thought I would be a father. I never planned it." "Do you regret bringing me here?" The question came out before she could contain it, revealing her greatest fear. The man stopped with the cup of coffee halfway to his mouth, surprised by the child's perception. "No," he replied after a moment. "I regret many things in life, but not this decision." A more comfortable silence settled in as they both ate. The millionaire discreetly observed how the girl, despite her evident hunger, maintained table manners that revealed the careful upbringing she had received. "Your mother taught you well," he commented. A sad smile appeared on the child's face. "She said that good manners cost nothing, but they're worth a lot." She was right. The millionaire put down his silverware, thoughtful. "There's a lot I need to know about you, and a lot you probably want to know about me. Why did you never look for us?" The direct question caught him off guard. "After Mom told you about me." The millionaire felt the weight of guilt compress his chest. He could lie, invent a convenient story about never having received the message. But something in that child's direct gaze demanded honesty. "Because I was selfish," he admitted finally. "Because my career and my businesses were more important to me than anything else. And because I was afraid." "Afraid?" The surprise was evident in her voice. "But you have everything. Having things is different from having responsibilities, from having people who depend on you emotionally." His voice was softer now. "Your well-being, your happiness, your future, all of that partially depends on me now. It's scary." The honesty of that answer touched the girl in an unexpected way. For the first time, she saw the man beyond the facade of power and arrogance. She saw someone as human and imperfect as anyone else. "Mum said that things that are scary are usually the most worthwhile." The millionaire looked at her in surprise, then smiled slightly. "Your mother was a wise woman." The conversation was interrupted by the entrance of the housekeeper, who seemed to have regained her composure after the initial shock. "Sir, the first appointments of the day have been rescheduled as per your instructions, and the stylist will arrive in an hour for the measurements." "Measurements?" asked the girl. "You need clothes," explained the millionaire. "And then we'll go to the doctor for a complete checkup. In the afternoon, we'll visit some schools." The speed with which he had organized everything left the girl stunned. In less than 24 hours, her life was being completely restructured. "I want to bring some things from my house," she said suddenly. "Mum's things, memories." The millionaire hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Of course, I'll send someone to get them." "No." The firmness in the child's voice surprised him. "I want to go personally, and I want to say goodbye to Mrs. Rodriguez. Tell her where I am so she doesn't worry when she gets back." The man studied the determination in his daughter's face and recognized something of himself in her, an indomitable will that did not bend easily. "All right, we'll go together." As the day progressed, a strange partnership began to form between those two very different people. The millionaire, accustomed to commanding and deciding, now found himself learning to listen and consider the needs of another person. The girl, accustomed to scarcity and the daily struggle for survival, began to understand that her life would never be the same. At some point, while they waited in the doctor's office waiting room, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were not yet a family in the traditional sense, but there was a beginning, a fragile and promising beginning. 3 months had passed since the night at the restaurant. The news of the powerful businessman who had discovered a daughter in dramatic circumstances had occupied the headlines for weeks, fueling speculation and debates about privilege, responsibility, and redemption. Gradually, as everything in the information age, the story was replaced by other scandals, other narratives. For the millionaire and the girl, however, each day was a new chapter in their improbable journey. On that autumn afternoon, the man watched from the window of his office in the mansion as his daughter played in the garden with a puppy, a gift he had given her after discovering that she had never had a pet. The transformation in both was remarkable for those who had known them before. The girl, now with proper and well-cared-for clothes, had gained weight. Her formerly hollow cheeks now showed a healthy color. The apprehensive look had given way to a lively curiosity, especially since she had started attending one of the best schools in the city. Her talents for math and English, mentioned in that first conversation at breakfast, had been confirmed. Her teachers did not spare praise for her performance and dedication. The millionaire, in turn, had surprised everyone with significant changes in his routine. The evening meetings were moved to business hours. The business trips, once frequent and prolonged, became shorter and more spaced out. His aides had to adapt to a boss who now set aside time to attend school presentations and pediatric medical appointments. "Sir," called the housekeeper, interrupting his thoughts, "the CPS representative has arrived for the monthly visit." Nodding, he adjusted his tie and headed to the main room, where a middle-aged woman with a notepad was waiting. She had replaced the initial representative, establishing a more cordial relationship with the unusual family. "How are things going?" she asked after the initial greetings. "Progressing," replied the millionaire, indicating an armchair for her. She had a nightmare last week, calling for her mother. It was difficult. The social worker nodded understandingly. "Grief takes time, especially for children. Have you talked about it?" "I tried," he admitted. "I'm not very good at that kind of conversation, but we're learning together." The sincerity of that answer would have shocked any of his executives. The man who never admitted weaknesses or uncertainties was openly acknowledging his limitations. "When is the final hearing?" asked the woman. "Next week. The lawyers guarantee that there will be no problems. All requirements have been met, and the judge seems favorable to confirming permanent custody." The girl then entered the room, the puppy at her heels, her laughter echoing through the once silent environment of the mansion. "Miss Castro," she exclaimed when she saw the social worker. "Look at Valor. He has already learned to sit and shake." "I see," smiled the woman. "You seem to be great friends." The millionaire watched the interaction with a mixture of admiration and surprise. The naturalness with which his daughter communicated, the ease with which she expressed emotions. All of this seemed almost alien to someone who had spent decades cultivating a facade of impassivity. "Can I talk to you for a little bit?" asked the social worker to the girl. "As we always do." Nodding, the child accompanied her to the sunroom, leaving her father alone with his thoughts. These private conversations were part of the follow-up protocol, a safe space where the girl could freely express any concerns or discomforts. While he waited, the millionaire reflected on the improbable journey that had brought him there. He remembered the man he was before that night at the restaurant, focused exclusively on accumulating wealth and power, unable to see the value of genuine connections. That man now seemed like a distant stranger. The transformation had not been easy. There were moments of deep doubt when he wondered if he could really be the father that child deserved. There were mistakes and relapses into old patterns of behavior. There were discussions with aides concerned about the time he was wasting on family matters. But there were also moments of crystal clear clarity, like when the girl had run to show him her first A+ in math, or when she had fallen asleep exhausted during a movie they were watching together, her head resting confidently on his shoulder. The social worker returned to the room, followed by the girl who went back to playing with the dog at the other end of the room. "She's adapting extraordinarily well," she commented in a low voice. "Children have remarkable resilience, especially when they feel safe and loved." "And you think she feels that way?" The question came out before he could contain it, revealing a vulnerability that he would never show in other contexts. The woman smiled gently. "Why don't you ask her?" After the social worker left, the millionaire found his daughter in her room, carefully organizing the few belongings she had brought from the shack. Photographs of her mother, a worn shawl, the wooden chest with the letter, and other small mementos. "May I come in?" he asked, knocking gently on the half-open door. She nodded, her eyes lighting up when she saw him, a reaction that still surprised him every time. "What are you doing?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Arranging Mum's things," she replied, "so I don't forget." "You'll never forget," he assured her. "Your mother will always be a part of you, just as she is a part of me now, even if I never realized it before." The girl looked at him, contemplative. "Do you think she would be happy to see us like this, together?" The millionaire reflected seriously on the question. He thought of Thompson, the young cook whose heart he had broken without any consideration. He thought of the dedicated mother who had raised a remarkable child alone without ever poisoning her with bitterness or resentment. "I think she would be very happy," he replied finally, "because in the end she was right about me. There was goodness hidden here," he pointed to his own chest, "even when I couldn't see it myself." The girl smiled, and in that smile was all the light that was missing in the millionaire's life. Without thinking, he stretched out his arms, and to his surprise and infinite joy, the child did not hesitate to hug him, the first real hug they had shared. At that moment, something broke inside him. The last barrier, the last vestige of the cold man he had been. Unexpected tears sprang from his eyes as he held that small being who, against all odds, had become the most important person in his life. "I promise," he whispered against her hair, "that I will strive every day to be the father you deserve." "And I'll teach you," she replied with the innocent wisdom of children, "how to open the door of the cage." He pulled back slightly, confused. "What cage?" "Yours. The one you built around your heart." A year had passed. The large garden of the mansion, once immaculately arranged but rarely used, was decorated for a celebration. Tables arranged under elegant tents, colorful flowers on every surface, and an atmosphere of genuine joy that had never existed in that space. The reason for the celebration was twofold: the girl's birthday and the official inauguration of the Thompson Foundation, created by the millionaire in honor of his daughter's mother. The organization, born from the ashes of scandal, had the mission of ensuring decent working conditions and educational opportunities for employees of the food industry and their children. The man who once saw people only as resources to be managed now led a silent revolution in the labor practices of his restaurants. Fairer wages, humanized hours, benefits beyond those required by law, changes that surprisingly did not decrease his profits but increased the quality and reputation of his establishments. Observing the arriving guests, an unusual mix of executives in expensive suits and employees of his restaurants accompanied by their families, the millionaire reflected on the long road he had traveled. His gaze met his daughter, who was running among the guests with the now-grown Valor at her heels, her crystalline laughter echoing through the garden. "I never imagined seeing such a complete transformation," commented a familiar voice. He turned to find the social worker, now no longer on official visit, but as a guest of the celebration. "Sometimes I don't even believe it," he admitted. It seems like I've lived two completely different lives. It's extraordinary how children can change our perspective, she observed, following his gaze towards the girl. They remind us what really matters. Do you know what she told me last night? The millionaire smiled at the memory. We were reviewing her math homework, something about values and proportions, and suddenly she looked at me and said, I used to think that being rich was having a lot of money. Now I know that wealth is something else. The celebration continued around them, laughter, music, the murmur of animated conversations. Among the guests was Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who had cared for the girl after her mother's death. Now recovered, she had been invited to be part of the child's life, a precious link to her past that the millionaire was keen to preserve. At one point in the party, a respectful silence settled when the host asked for the floor. Standing with his daughter at his side, he looked like a very different version of the man who had humiliated a hungry child a year before. I want to thank everyone for being here on this very special day, he began, his voice softer than many had ever heard. We are here to celebrate not only the birthday of this extraordinary young woman, he paused to smile at his daughter, but also to mark the official start of a project that bears the name of an equally extraordinary woman. Thompson! There was respectful applause. Many of those present knew the story. The dedicated cook who had raised a daughter alone, ignored by the system until her premature death. This foundation is born from a belated but sincere recognition that the true value of a business is not only in its profits, but in the lives it sustains and the communities it helps to build. As he spoke about the foundation's objectives and the first projects already underway, the millionaire noticed that his daughter was watching something beyond the guests. Following her gaze, he saw a simple family that had just arrived. People from the neighborhood where the girl had lived, he recognized. People who, a year ago, he would not have even noticed, let alone invited to his home. One of the foundation's first projects, he continued, deviating slightly from his planned speech, will be the revitalization of the Hope Village neighborhood, with a special focus on building a community library and a vocational training center, because we understand that opportunities should not be privileges of the few, but rights of all. New applause, warmer this time. The girl looked at her father. With evident pride, her eyes shining in a way that was worth more than all the millions in his bank accounts. After the official speech, while the guests enjoyed the celebration, the millionaire found a moment of quiet under the shade of an old tree at the edge of the garden. From there, he could observe the entire scene, the colorful clothes, the movement of the people, the genuine joy that permeated the environment. His daughter found him there, sitting silently beside him. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked, using that word for the first time without the formal sir that still occasionally punctuated their conversations. The man felt his heart expand as he heard that simple word, Dad, pronounced with such affection. "I've never been better," he replied sincerely. "I was just thinking about how life comes full circle." "How so?" "A year ago, at that restaurant, I thought I was living the worst moment of my life. A public scandal, a child claiming to be my daughter, my reputation at risk." He paused, contemplating the irony. "I didn't realize that I was, in fact, living the most important moment of my life. The moment when I finally began to see what really matters." The girl smiled, that smile that illuminated everyone around her. "Mom used to say that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we should never have lost." "Your mother was extremely wise," he observed, taking his daughter's small hands in his. "And you are exactly like her." Across the garden, a group of children was calling for the girl, inviting her to play. With a questioning look at her father, she waited for his approval. "Go," he encouraged. "It's your party. Enjoy it." As he watched her run towards her new friends, the millionaire reflected on the miracle that had transformed his life. The child who had entered his restaurant barefoot and with a dirty face had not asked for money or status. She had only asked for a plate of food, and unknowingly, she had offered in return something infinitely more valuable, the chance for redemption. The possibility of rebuilding a soul that he did not even know was lost. In the end, he murmured to himself, I wasn't the one who saved her. She was the one who saved me. Getting up, he walked back to the celebration, to the colorful and vibrant world that his daughter had taught him to see. A world where true value was not measured in bank figures or accumulated properties, but in shared smiles, in outstretched hands, in second chances grasped with determination. A world where finally he was not just rich, he was truly wealthy. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.